Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us for our webinar today. It looks like it's right at the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Mike Rustici. I'm going to be taking you through the beginning parts of this webinar, and I'm really excited to share this story about how Tin Can is being used by AT&T in some of their learning programs. I've told this story anecdotally time and time again because it has just been so resonant with me with some of the power and the great things that are happening in the industry right now, and I'm super excited to be able to present it in depth for real finally now. But my hat's off to AT&T. They've been a tremendous early adopter and great partner, and just tremendously innovative in how they're jumping into new technology and diving into things and really taking the lead in some of these things. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of that story and that arc of how this came to be and how long they've been working with the stuff and the great things as we dive into the story in a little bit more depth. So starting off, though, just a few quick logistics. Feel free to enter any questions that you have into the question panel that you see in the GoToWebinar here. There's a lot of you on the webinar, so we're not going to be able to get to all of them live. But one thing we always do is we try to answer every single question that comes in and send out those questions and answers in an email to all of the attendees afterwards. Also, that email that you'll get in a day or so will also include a link to the slides from here, as well as a recording of this webinar if you want to share that with friends or go back and listen to things. Those materials are going to be available, so you don't have to be taking notes furiously as we're going through all this super interesting stuff. Similarly, if you're interested in learning how your organization can implement something similar to what we're going to be talking about here, there's going to be an opportunity at the end to register for a free Tin Can strategy session to go talk about how these same concepts might be applicable in your organization. So we're going to start with some really quick introductions, and then I'm going to set a little bit of context around the tool that AT&T is using over here, the Watershed Learning Record Store. We're going to presume by now, if you've made your way into this particular webinar, that you're already kind of familiar with Tin Can and some of its capabilities. So we're going to take some liberties in assuming all of those things, but if you want a refresher as to what's happening in the industry and how this new technology is introducing a whole lot of new capabilities, shoot us an email. We'll point you to some great resources. We'll be happy to walk you through that one-on-one and how it might apply to your organization. So just starting with quick introductions here. My name is Mike Rustici. I'm the president of Rustici Software, Tin Can Geek in Chief. I largely serve the role as one of our employees, so gracefully described as mascot for our organization right now, going around and talking about a lot of these new things and changes that are happening within the industry. With me today, we have a few folks from AT&T. Larla, would you like to say hi?
Hi, I'm Larla Bogle. I'm a lead training manager in design for AT&T and thrilled to be sharing the story today.
And James is here as well. Do you want to say a quick hello, James?
Yes, James Merrill. I'm a lead technical architect within AT&T University and a partner in crime with Larla.
We've got Susan Bounce here as well. She's the Director of Corporate Compliance. She'll be available in the chat to answer some questions as they might come up. So we're going to start with a quick poll question. Jeff, if you want to throw that up on the screen for a couple minutes here. Go ahead and take a few minutes to answer the poll and gauge some of your attitudes going into the webinar here. Okay, I think that's probably been enough time. We're going to come back to this poll question a little bit later on. So start off just real quick, high level. What is the Watershed Learning Record Store, the tool that we're going to be talking about that was used as part of this project? If you've heard me talk about Tin Can, you've heard me talk and if you've heard a lot of the buzz, you've heard about all these new capabilities that are coming down the pipe because of Tin Can. But this next phase of adoption requires that the tools be put in place to allow us to fully capitalize on Tin Can's potential. Well, the Watershed Learning Record Store is our effort to do just that. It's a tool that allows you to make sense of a very large set of all the new data that is becoming available via Tin Can, taking a large mass of relatively unstructured data coming from many different sources and trying to make sense of that. And one thing I want to emphasize as an important point there is the way we're going about these things, I think is really important, is through something we've trademarked the Watershed method, but under the surface of that, what we're doing is using a scientific method approach as part of all of these early Tin Can adoption efforts. Understanding this data is a really, really big challenge, and oftentimes that can be as much of a business concern as a technical one. It's important as you start to enter a project where you're looking at new sets of data and trying to make sense of those, to be scientific about it, to be analytical. We're encouraging people to form a hypothesis and then collect data to validate or refute that hypothesis. And you're going to see AT&T is a great example of this experiment-centric analysis, where we have a question about our learning programs that we can now answer because the data is available. So we put forth a structure, a hypothesis to go out and validate that and to see what else we can learn. I'll just kind of give you a quick rundown of some of the things that AT&T and many other organizations are doing with Tin Can and Watershed. There's a lot of people looking at starting just with simple things like participation, doing things like correlating whether participation, or determining whether increased participation correlates with additional competence. Lots of people doing tracking accomplishments and looking at the way that these accomplishments or milestones or badges are achieved through various different learning paths. Lots of work out there doing actual job performance, looking at people performing their jobs in the real world, using Tin Can to start to gather that data and bring it into our training programs. A bunch of other people out there using a learning record store in Tin Can to consolidate data from many, many different systems, be they traditional training systems like LMSs or intranets or video tools or simulations, or non-traditional learning systems where a lot of this performance data happens and where other learning events that might be non-traditional might also be happening. Lots of work being done mapping out competencies, assessing strengths and weaknesses of people, particularly comparing those across different parts of the organization. And that gets into one of the really interesting things we'll talk a whole lot more about, is this notion of population comparison. Let's go back to the scientific method approach, and can we take a control group and compare that to a study group to look if the things we are doing in our training programs are actually making a difference. I'm fired up for you guys to hear about some of the stuff AT&T did with this type of methodology. Learning path analysis. Many learners will take different paths through learning applications. We can start to look at where people are deviating from the ideal path and how people are choosing to navigate through learning. Impact analysis. Can we measure how long the impact of a training intervention lasts for? How often do we need to be providing doses of training and learning to achieve continuous impact and improvement? Another quick but really, really cool thing happening right now is the ability to take a lot of really in-depth look into assessments and how people are performing, and different ways that we can slice and dice all of this really, really cool data relating to learning assessment. So that was just a really kind of quick high-level overview to set the stage to hopefully kind of inspire some thought about how this technology is being used and how that might be able to be applied in your organization, some of the new things that people are doing with all of this technology. And with that just kind of quick overview, I'm going to turn you over to what you really came here for, which is to hear how AT&T is applying a lot of this stuff in their organization right now. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Larla to take you through their project and what they've done and some really cool stuff that we've seen along the way.
Thanks, Mike. I am so excited to share the story about the Code Challenge Proof of Concept, and it's just a real honor to present beside you. And I also want to thank all of you who have joined our call today. To give a little background, I believe I need to start with giving you just some real quick information about AT&T's compliance approach. Historically, as with all companies' compliance programs, the primary focus has been to annually track that our employees have completed the policies and guideline courses they need to effectively conduct business. Well, to accomplish this, AT&T uses an automated communication and tracking system, and we have a team of compliance coordinators to ensure that all of our employees complete that required training. Now, at the foundation of our ethical standards is the AT&T Code of Business Conduct. Every employee is required to read the code annually. It's also available for our customers to read if you're interested on the internet at att.com. In 2005, I was given the instructional design responsibility for that annual code course. And at that time, it was a lengthy PDF. Our employees were given 1 hour to read it. And sure, they learned the content by doing this, but We not so lovingly refer to it as a read and heed. So until it became mine, I had dutifully read and followed the code, but now that it was mine, I knew I needed to find a way to make the training more engaging and interactive, and quite honestly, I became obsessed with one question, and that is, how do I provide effective, efficient, and engaging compliance training for 243,000 employees with 3,934 different job titles? Really pretty overwhelming, and I have to tell you that this is a question that haunted my dreams, and in fact, it was what nightmares were made out of. So I'm going to get a little personal here, and please remember I just told you that we have almost 250,000 employees. If you're in AT&T territory, I have to tell you AT&T employees are everywhere, okay? We're there at the grocery store right next to you. Now, I want you to meet my mama and my daddy. I told my parents that every AT&T employee takes the compliance courses that I create. And a little later, they told me that they were telling every AT&T employee that they ran into that their daughter created the AT&T Code of Business Conduct course. Jeff, can you publish the results of that poll that we had up real quick at the beginning of the call? Yep, this is what I expected. You all know it's very boring, but if you look at those results, most of you don't like the person who completes your compliance training for your company either, okay? Thanks, Jeff. Let's go back to the slides. Well, while I was prepping for this call, I told my parents I was going to expose them as bragging parents, and my mom's response was this. Well, we didn't want to tell you this because we didn't want to hurt your feelings, but we stopped telling people that a long time ago, because the response we usually get is just, oh. What can I say? You know, my bragging parents stopped bragging, so how's that for personal motivation? I either needed to change my name or find a way to help people love compliance as much as I do, and obviously that is what I needed to do. So things changed. Susan Bounds became my client in 2009, and she shared my goal of just transforming compliance training into a more engaging exercise. A real big moment in 2011, Susan called, and she challenged me to dream and to dream big. She asked me to think beyond what we could realistically do and to think what we would do if there were no technical restrictions. I have to tell you, this was not hard for me to do at all. I think my exact words were, Susan, don't say that unless you mean it. I've been dreaming about this for a long time. Well, we also tackled the reality and realistic as we were dreaming, and we made the courses available for mobile learning, and in 2012 and 2013, we streamlined the code as well as other compliance courses, and we saved 670,562 AT&T employee production hours. I know that's a staggering amount, and in case you're wondering, over that 2-year period, in 2 years, we saved 76.5 years of employee productivity through this streamlining. So I'm sure you're asking, how do we do that? Well, the code became supported by a highly interactive compliance site that was created by our compliance department. It provides greater details on compliance topics. There's a library of additional compliance courses and resources. We moved some of our longer courses into video content, and they were created to better target specific job titles. And while this made a huge impact overall, the actual length of the code course for current employees went from that 1 hour down to 20 minutes. So that was definitely added efficiency. But I want to draw you a real quick analogy. Just like that poll showed, you all understand the value and the need for compliance. But we also know shots from doctors are very important. You know, we make our appointment, we grit our teeth, we get it over with, we take the shot in the arm. But I doubt anyone has ever thanked a doctor for using a 20-inch needle instead of a 60-inch one. That doesn't mean it still isn't painful. Well, reducing the time it took to complete that training was definitely improvement, but the code still contains its essential information. But we wanted to make sure that the employees were really learning the content instead of just clicking through it, with that objective to get that completion in their training record. Our dream was much bigger. In fact, we wanted to completely change the approach to compliance. My passion really came to move away from a legal-focused compliance mentality that says this is what you have to do, to really empowering ethical behavior. And what that means is allowing our employees to really believe and understand that those decisions are important, so that they take that ownership to research and ask the questions to make the correct choices because it's important and it's the right thing to do. And because Susan said to dream big, we also wanted to not only impact the employees' ethical behavior, but don't forget about my mom and dad. I wanted to change their attitude about compliance training itself. Well, after much research and discussion, we created a vision for what we called the Code Challenge. And we settled on that we were going to use what's called an experiential design learning theory approach. Now, just for those of you that aren't familiar with that, just real very basic explanation is that's a learning science approach and instructional design that believes that when someone makes a decision, it's based on what they have learned and what they have experienced, and many times what they've experienced outweighs what someone has told them. It's the difference between being told the stove is hot and then touching that stove and knowing that it is. But unfortunately, in compliance, it's usually a one and done. You weren't given that opportunity to gain an experience. I mean, if you mess up in compliance, it can have huge ramifications. So we wanted to find a way to provide our learners with some true experience that they can draw on. And to do that, we wanted to allow our learners to engage intellectually and emotionally with the experience. So we chose to do a write-your-own-adventure type branching scenario where what happened next was totally dependent on the choice that learner made. And because we wanted to give the learners the real freedom to experiment and explore and experience firsthand personal consequences and ramifications, and no retribution at all if they decided to see what would happen if they intentionally chose what they knew was a wrong choice. We really wanted to make it realistic. In fact, we even programmed a negative response from a customer when the employee chose the, quote, correct answer, because we know in real life with compliance sometimes what makes sense isn't actually what's required to meet legal requirements. Well, we knew that if we wanted to be successful at really encouraging our learners to explore, we needed to assure them that participation and the results would not become a part of a permanent compliance training history. I mean, let's face it, we program them that you take the course, now it's in your training record, and the results of that are there for everyone to see. So in a really bold, big dream step, we decided to experiment and see if people would complete the code challenge if it was voluntary. I mean, I know that's pretty radical. Who would intentionally choose to engage in compliance training? Well, we also wanted to determine, because it was voluntary, what type of incentives would most likely cause an employee to participate. We included some of the more common ones, like a teaser video, badgification, like Mike mentioned, but we also got really creative there too. We really focused on seeing if a promised earned donation for a charity would motivate our learners. Now let me explain. This is really a perfect combination because another real corporate culture aspect for AT&T is volunteerism and community engagement of both our employees' time and our resources. I'm going to take a bragging moment here. The Civic 50 list ranks the most community-minded companies in the U.S., and AT&T was ranked as number 3 on that inaugural list. So as you can see, merging altruism and ethics with together seemed to be a really perfect match. So while we were dreaming and conceptualizing the code challenge, Susan and the corporate compliance team was also establishing a new tracking tool that was going to give us aggregated reports of all our compliance questions and concerns that are reported through our AT&T compliance hotline or our online reporting tool. Now, what's so cool about this is these reports provide us now with real-time data on what issues are being reported, and not just reported, but the outcomes of the investigations of those reports. We can segment that information and analyze the data to determine if there's maybe an area of concern associated with a specific job title, a location, or a management group. So for a learning geek like me, I mean, this new tool opened up the opportunity to measure if training could have a direct positive input and impact on the number of reports and after investigation if there were true violations. You know, we knew that this tool, if we could find a way to leverage it, could function. And instead of only being preventative in compliance, we could leverage what we learned from this reporting tool to be diagnostic, even maybe predictive in the analytics of what might happen based on history. And with that information, we could become prescriptive. And what I mean by that is, for instance, let's say we identified that a certain business unit or group was having an increase in, let's say, conflict of interest violations. We could create a code challenge that would address the specific reported problem and customize it so it was unique for that group of individuals. So here again, the excitement level of what we were dreaming was really large. Well, in 2012, our leadership agreed to support a proof of concept. You know, I started writing the scripts, and we determined that surveys was the best way to gather the information. And we added James to our team because you're going to find out he's our technical guru, and I can dream that he can make it happen. And while we were working on this, my director mentioned to us that AT&T was going to field trial Tin Can. Now, this was very early on. I'd heard the word Tin Can. You know, being in the telecommunication and technology company, about all I knew was that she could not be talking about tin cans on a string. So I quickly educated myself, read everything I could about it, and I've got to tell you, I was fascinated by what it was claiming it could do, because it hadn't really proved itself yet, but there were some amazing claims out there. This is again where I have to confess, I did a little begging to my director, and I was elated when the co-challenge proof of concept was chosen to be AT&T Tin Can pilot. So that's the backstory, and here's where Rustici comes in. Mike, I'm gonna start out by telling a story on you too, if you don't mind. Our first call with Rustici, Mike was on the call, and I explained our vision and our dream for co-challenge. And the more we talked, the more excited I think we all became. And towards the end of the call, Mike told me that our call actually was on his birthday. And what he said to me was that our project was the best present that we could give him. You know, it has almost been impossible to measure if training has a direct impact on learners' behaviors or attitudes, especially in the area of compliance. But in that first conversation, we realized that with Tin Can, we were going to make that happen. You know, his enthusiasm and his support and understanding of the vision and what we wanted to measure and the impact that these results could have on AT&T and learning in general was just impossible to miss. And I will tell you, we did have to extend our proof of concept timeline, but it was definitely worth it. Mike, I hope you don't mind that I kind of told a story on you there.
No, absolutely. If I could just interject for a minute, you know, when we realized this, it kind of dawned on me that, you know what, I just had a birthday. In fact, it's been exactly 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day since the birthday that you're talking about. And I think that's an important thing to try to convey is, you know, just while all of this stuff is happening rapidly, while this industry is undergoing a period of rapid change, these things still take a long time. You know, it's been 13 months since we kind of got kicked off on this project, and just now are we able to really come out and tell that story and look back at that. And, you know, I say that, you know, to me, a year in a 40-person company seems like it's for an eternity. And I know Larla was expressing in our rehearsals as a 240 1,000-person company. This seemed like it moved really fast. But, to the people out there who are listening and hearing about all of this stuff happening, that I can tell you that there's a lot more bubbling under the surface. AT&T was a really early one to jump in on this adoption at 13 months ago. There's a lot of activity that's happened in that subsequent 13 months that I think we're going to start to hear more and more about. I'm excited to share many of those stories and to hear about all the ones that I don't even know about. It's going to be a really exciting time over the next few months to see how this is progressing in the real world.
Yeah, well, I know, Mike, you said that the project was a gift, but man, we've sure figured out what a gift Tin Can has been for us with this project. Well, let's kind of go back to when we first started. Mike just said it took some time, but the thing is, sometimes to do things right, you have to take that time. The power and the level of information that we soon discovered we could or have with Tin Can and Watershed, I'm going to be honest, it was a bit overwhelming at first. There were just so many questions we could ask. I mean, once that gift was opened, it was like, well, yeah, what do you want to know? And I wanted to know it all. And we worked with Mike, and he really helped us to decide what to focus on. And we focused to 3 formal hypotheses. The first was that behavior. For you designers out there, it's that L3 that we usually can't do. Would this method actually directly impact learner behavior? And then just because, return on investment is huge, we wanted to determine if a video-based simulation caused the same amount of retention and engagement than a text-based simulation. Because let's face it, that video costs a lot more time and a lot more just finances. So if it's the same results, that would tell us what to do next. And then the donation was just very interesting to both of it. Was that idea a good idea to cause people to participate? Well, after we had our hypothesis, Mike and Jan, who is an AT&T statistical specialist, helped us identify our data needs and ensured that we were following appropriate scientific evaluation methods. And I think that's real important, too. This just wasn't a let's ask questions. There was a real process that was placed with this, and Mike helped guide us through that with Jan. We set up 4 target groups, donation, no donation, high fidelity, which is the text, which is the video, and then text only. We set up the control group, and then as you see here, we had the majority of our randomly assigned participants view what we thought would be the best. What our hypothesis would be the most engaging, and that would be the video with the donation. Now, I'm going to be handing this over to James in just a second so he can get more to the technical aspects of things. But before I do that, I think it's really important that I paint a really clear picture of the level of trust and partnership that had to go into this project. Around here we say that we build the airplane while we're flying it, and that is exactly what happened. James and I had already researched and chosen NextLearn SimWriter to create the simulation before our partnership with Tin Can was even, possible in the thought process at all. But after our partnership, we needed a tool that could send Tin Can statements to Watershed, and honestly, it was so new that there were no off-the-shelf tools on the market at that time that could even do that. Well, the Rustici team and James formed a key relationship with NextLearn. They were looking at developing their HTML5 and their Tin Can API versions of the software. NextLearn kept the communications open, and they upgraded their implementation plans for their SimWriter tool so that it would send the customized Tin Can statements that we needed for the code challenge to support our hypothesis. So here we've got NextLearn, and we've got Rustici, and we've got AT&T, 3 companies all coordinating for this one project. So while NextLearn was upgrading SimWriter, James was creating our platform, Rustici was building the Watershed instance with all of its magic, the compiled results from all these different data sources. Our IT was preparing the platform behind our firewall. I was producing the learning content. Susan was managing all the aspects like our target audience and our donation. And each part was critical, and each one was being created just totally trusting that the other could deliver their piece that in many cases had never been done or delivered before. So now that you've got that clear picture, I'm going to hand it off to James, who, once again, I'm the dreamer. He's the doer. He's the one that technically made this happen, so he can explain to you some of the technical principles that went behind this.
Thanks, Lana. I appreciate it. You know, I had a lot of fun with this project, and we learned a tremendous amount. One of the reasons it was so fun was because of the energy and excitement that Larla brought to the project. You know, I supported this initiative as the Tin Can technical lead, but Larla did do a lot of the work there. She created the video scripts, the scenarios, and basically just handed those off to me to implement the Tin Can and a few other technologies. I came to the project with little technical understanding of Tin Can, although I did have a technical background. So this was a custom project. We did not have tools to simply publish the Tin Can code. We researched various tools in the market. At the time, they did not necessarily have the means of providing the custom API statements and the scenario-based branching capabilities that we wanted. However, through partnerships, as Larla mentioned, with Rustici and XLearn, and a lot of trial and error on our part, reading through documentation, we were able to attain the desired tool and functionality we needed. When Larla came to me with the dream, I extracted the elements listed here on the screen as key priorities we needed to accomplish. And over the next few slides, we're going to show you some screen captures of the code challenge and talk about each of these key principles. The first thing I wanted to talk about was accessibility. As part of the vision, we wanted the code challenge to be accessible. Our current LMS required 7 to 10 clicks and about 1 minute to access. Through integration with our global login standard for identification, we're able to trim down the time to 1 click plus the user's password. For the login screen, we were able to gather all the required information we needed to uniquely identify the user, such as their username, their password, or I'm sorry, not their password, username, their email address, and which are all important fields. We also wanted to make it very informal and non-mandatory. As part of the vision, we wanted the code challenge to be hosted outside the LMS for a couple of reasons. First, we wanted to avoid the stigma of the code challenge being required, compliance training. And second, we wanted to give it a sense of being informal and non-mandatory, where people could explore freely within the simulation. We wanted to have it be simple and integrated, so we built a welcome page to track the learner progress through each phase of the code challenge. Shown here on the screen, capture the learner once you progress from the pre-survey into an introduction video, to the code challenge, and then finally a pro-survey. Using Tin Can's API, we're able to keep track of the learner progress. So in the event that they had to leave and come back, we could place them right where they left off. When the user first accessed the page, there was code that would randomly assign them to one of the 4 groups. So we always knew a group they were assigned to, and we also passed this information to the Learning Records store so that we could use that within our reports. Based on the assigned group, excuse me, we were also able to provide them with very specific instructions based on their user group. So here you can see in this example, the learner had completed their pre-survey, they had completed the introduction video, they had completed the code challenge, and they were ready to take the post-survey. So we would provide them with those detailed instructions based on their state and what group they were a part of. It was also very integrated. Even though it seemed like one application to the user, behind the scenes we were bringing together several different platforms and systems. We had a Cold Fusion welcome page. We were using SimWriter by NextLearn as a simulation tool. We had the Watershed Learning Records store. We were using pre- and post-survey in Testcraft, and our global login application, all of which were integrated together for one seamless experience for the end user. So the learner was presented with a natural progression of events, which to their eyes seemed as one system. We used the user's login information to the greatest extent possible and pass it from system to system, never requiring that they re-authenticate or re-identify themselves. So we always knew who they were and where they needed to go. So this is an example. As part of the code challenge, we wanted it to be immersive. This is a screen capture from the SimWriter application by NextLearn. As you can see here, we had several different paths so we could take the learner down, branching scenarios. So we needed a tool that would allow us to easily build these scenario-based simulations. After some research, we settled on SimWriter by NextLearn. Code challenge was a scenario-based simulation that placed the learner in a real-world problem. The code challenge allowed the learner to explore different paths and see different outcomes without repercussions or a poor completion score. It also enabled loopbacks to try again and see different consequences based on their choices. The code challenge is also video-based, so I apologize we couldn't show you actually the video here, but this is an example of a setting that takes place with the employee here shown on the left, and he's asking his lifelong friend on the right here if he can take a look at his mother's bill because she's getting older. For some reason, the bill is higher than it should be. So this is the screen of that conversation, video conversation that took place between the employee and the friend, and there's several video segments within the simulation. After the video plays, the learner playing the part of the employee is basically presented with scenarios in which they are asked to select how they wanted to proceed. Throughout the simulation, they were presented with several different scenarios, and using Tin Can, we were able to track each option the learner selected and pass this information back to the learning record store. On a side note, when we first selected SimWriter, they did not have that custom Tin Can capability we needed to accomplish this level of custom API calls. However, we were able to build a strong partnership with them and enable the needed functionality. This next screen is an example of one of the branching scenarios where the learner made some poor choices and was given the opportunity to take a time machine to try again. However, if they chose to continue, they could do so. So we use Tin Can API to track their decisions, this allowing us to determine, again, the number of paths that they took through the simulation. At the end of the simulation, we provided them with a scenario summary, and this is an example of the summary screen in which the learner made a poor decision. And then following the summary screen, they were presented with links to different resources and reference information if they wanted to learn more. And in some cases, we anticipated, we anticipated learners would want to learn more in some cases, and we were able to, we enabled each of these links with the Tin Can API so that we could identify how many users were exploring the various links, and we could gather some information from analyzing that data. So the last, so I want to talk a little bit, data rich was one of the other key elements that we wanted to attain. So most of you likely know the promise of Tin Can is the ability to gather all sorts of rich data, but we really wanted to test that ability and track every interaction a learner took. And even though we had identified the specific data that we wanted to collect, we went above and beyond that and gathered more information. So this screen capture here is a screen capture of the activity stream found within the Watershed Learning Record Store. The activity stream would show the statements that are being made real time as the users interacted with the simulation. For someone who is new to Tin Can, this was also a great tool because it allowed you to validate your code as you're developing the application. You could go to the activity stream and make sure that your code, your statements were indeed taking place. And Honestly, without this activity stream, I think I would have gone crazy, because it really provided that extra level of validation that I needed to make sure the statements were working correctly. And frankly, it was just fun to sit back and watch the statements as they come in once we went live. So this is an example of the reports available with the Watershed Learning Record Store. It would analyze the statements from the activity stream, gathering the different data that was needed to help validate or to report on the different hypotheses that we created up front. So, in summary, why Watershed? We wanted to use the Watershed to track and manage user progress through using the state API. So with the use of XPI, we could keep track of each phase of the learner, could identify them through within the welcome page. We could see if they viewed the video, access a pre-survey. We kept track of them all throughout the code challenge. We recorded their donation, and we identified if they had accessed the post-survey. We sent these user interactions and completions for each of these different phases, everything down to the URLs that they selected. And then we used the Watershed Learning Record Store to analyze that data into reports to test our hypothesis, providing a very visual and graphical representation of our hypothesis. So Larla, with that, it's back to you. Larla, you there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. James, I thank you for that. And I want to admit, I spent way too much time during the proof of concept just watching that activity stream update in real time. It was just fascinating to see. The big question is, how did we benefit from using Tin Can and Watershed with our proof of concept? What did we gain that we wouldn't have if we hadn't leveraged these tools? There's so many I could share, but I think one of the most surprising benefits and an immediate benefit we gained is that because the Tin Can statements did let us quickly address any technical issues by looking at those statements in the activity stream, if someone said they had a problem, we could immediately identify where they clicked and exactly where they were stuck. It was just like we were standing behind them, no matter where they were located, observing how they were interacting with that content. So, as always with some technical tickets, it's just basic user error in the navigation. And with the Tin Can activity stream, we can immediately identify that. And with that, we're taking that and improving navigation instructions for the next code challenge. But for those that were actually having technical issues, which I have to say I was so pleased there were so few, especially since there were so many new things that we were doing technically, we very quickly identified that all of the people who were having a technical issue were using a specific browser. I am not going to browser bash today, but I will tell you that just switching our users to another browser fixed all of the real technical issues that we had, which to me was amazing considering all the firsts that had happened. So the activity stream, a surprise benefit is that it made technical support so quick and painless. And I don't know about you, but that in itself would be worth its weight in gold. But I'm sure you're also interested in hearing about a learning benefit that we gained. Let me explain real quick how we were measuring retention. We provided a pre and a post survey that included a knowledge check that was concerning how and when it was appropriate to access account information for someone you know. This was based around that scenario James shared, because obviously safeguarding our customers' records is just a critical compliance issue for us. We included a knowledge check. I like to refer to it as a 3 bears type multiple response question, because one of the answers was too soft. It was a mama bear. It was way too lenient. There were 2 correct answers that were just right, which were our baby bear. And then we have the Papa Bear, and that is a wrong answer that is wrong because it's more restrictive than what the laws or the policies actually require. So this was the setup. How many got the answer correct before and after our co-challenge? So what did we learn? What did the results show us? Well, first of all, what we found is that on the post-test, almost 100% of our learners did not choose that more lenient answer, which of course is the critical one. So we saw very definite improvement from the pre and the post test, which was proof that the delivery method was very effective. We were also not surprised. Our hypothesis was proved correct that learners more accurately answered that final knowledge check question after viewing the video-based version, the just text version. But, this is hard to admit, but we were really kind of surprised at how many still missed the overall getting it right. So we took the data and we broke down those who didn't select the correct answer by business unit with an eye to do that prescriptive learning to a target audience like we had previously discussed. But when we did that breakdown, we made an absolutely amazing discovery. Those who chose a wrong answer consistently chose the answer that was more restrictive, the Papa Bear answer, the one that was too hard, that one that was more cautious than what policies and laws would require. And those who missed choosing one of the 2 correct answers missed it because they did not select the choice that included needing to engage a supervisor. Now, that in itself would be interesting and make us go, okay. But because our survey did allow for comments, we've scoured over these hundreds and hundreds of comments. And what we found is that we received very insightful and, I must tell you, passionate comments from many, many testers who felt they wanted to explain why they chose the answers that they did. And here's what the overall learning was. Our employees knew what we would consider to be those 2 right answers, but they were insistent that the most cautious response was what was really required, and that they needed to take personal ownership of the customer's request instead of involving an upper-level management. And they let us know how they would have solved and met that customer service need in a different way. I hope you're really grasping what Tin Can helped us measure. Our employees, when placed in a challenging ethical scenario, choose to answer even when they knew it would be counted as, quote, wrong, because they believed that protecting our customers' information was that important. And they also believed that taking ownership and finding another way to meet the customer's need is the right thing to do. And because they had that freedom to explore and to not have to worry about a test score like that we gave them, is what allowed them to actually let us see with Tin Can where their ethical behavior stood. So let me put it this way. Tin Can helped us use a scientifically valid approach to measure numerically and prove the existing high level of our employees' ethical behavior in this area of compliance. I hope you're getting how significant that is. You know, when it's what is our largest lesson learned, there were many. It takes well over an hour to go through every result. But when it comes down to it, the truth is probably going to surprise you. What did we learn? The largest lesson is that we didn't learn enough. Now, it's not because what we learned wasn't valuable and exciting and important and engaging, but this was just our first round with Tin Can. And what it really gave us is it sharpened us to really understand our audience. And now we know how to better frame and better equip and ask better questions. You know, on a personal level, as an instructional designer, I've also got to tell you that Tin Can has absolutely spoiled me. I want more. every project now that I work on, I'm thinking about what learner actions and outcomes Tin Can show me that I couldn't have known before. And now that I've kind of opened the tin can and tasted what's in it, I have to tell you, it's not just that it's not just what I want, but I really believe that to do my job effectively and provide that engaging training, it's information I need to know. So what's next for us? The knowledge we gained has definitely helped us decide to adopt a co-challenge concept in compliance training. We're already working on the next challenge topic that will be applicable on an enterprise-wide basis. Based on our result, one of our largest business units has picked up that dream to start providing prescriptive co-challenges that are going to specifically target their employees and the unique ethical decisions that they're required to make. They're putting together a team, and their goal is to eventually release one per month so that they can really drive the ethical behavior in that business unit. You know, bottom line is Tin Can made what was impossible for us a year ago very achievable. You know, Susan, James, and I are now discussing how we're going to leverage Tin Can to enhance the Code of Conduct course in 2015. I am beyond excited. I can't share this plan yet because they're still being formulated. But what I will tell you is when it happens, my mama and daddy are going to be able to go back to telling employees what their daughter does, because I do believe it's going to be that revolutionary, and the response when they tell them that is not just going to be the oh and silence. You know, bottom line is I will never stop asking the question of how we meet the needs of this many employees with this many job titles to affect behavior. But I will tell you now that it's in sweet dreams and not in nightmares. And bottom line is it's because we now can really make those dreams happen, and it's by leveraging the power of Tin Can, pure and simple. So it's been a wonderful adventure, and it's just chapter 1. I can't wait to see what happens with chapter 2. We're going to make that happen. So, Mike, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Larla, and thank you, James, as well. It's been great to hear your story, and I appreciate you guys so much for taking the time out to share some with all of us. And I just want to go through kind of some of the key takeaways I get from this story that I think are important points to drive home. The first comes about that data richness, the ability to go in and capture every click within the simulation, and things that are happening external to the traditional training environments. Just the richness and volume of data that can be brought together is a really, really important shift. Next one, yes, it does work as promised. I heard Larla say, and I love the fact that she said, I was skeptical of all of the promises. Tin Can promises a whole lot of things, and as the one often getting up on a stage making those promises, I want people to challenge them. I want people to be validating them. And we have a long way to go to fully realize the potential of everything that we're claiming Tin Can do. But these first steps are showing real concrete benefit and things taking a step forward and working. The next one, as I interjected in the middle there, is it takes a while. It takes a while to get these things up and running. Industry progress is happening, but it just, life and change takes time, especially when you're talking about big organizations, complex technology. It's all coming, but it's just going to take a little while to get out there. The real-time nature of the data integration, the ability to have all of this stuff coming together at one time and being able to just see it all together. A lot of this data is, I see some of the questions that we're going to get to in a minute here starting to come through, being fed over to me, and some of them have to deal with, okay, why did we need Tin Can for this? Why couldn't we do it without Tin Can? And the answer is, people are doing things like this without the standard, without the interoperability of being able to flow data together. But what it winds up as is a series of spreadsheets that are then being manually woven together. I talked to somebody else from a different organization wanting to do something similar to this project, and they do this type of analysis, but it literally takes them 2 days of gathering and collating spreadsheets to bring all this data together. The big thing that Tin Can provides to this type of environment is for that data to come together seamlessly in a common format and be aggregated in one place in real time. And AT&T, it kind of took one for the team with this project. You heard them say NextLearn didn't offer this capability. The other tools that they were using didn't offer this capability yet. They went in and they could have taken a path to go say, well, we're just going to gather this data with a spreadsheet, but they chose to do it with the Tin Can format as an investment for the future. Because the real payoff isn't right now, where a lot of this integration takes time and effort, and we need a partnership with NextLearn and other vendors. The real payoff happens in a few more years as these tools start to have all this data flowing together. This stuff starts to become possible without the big project and set of collaboration. Other big takeaways, not having to use the LMS, the ability to launch directly into a course is one I hear so many people get so excited about. It seems like one of those simple things that we should have been able to do years ago, but we've struggled with so many times. I love how they took the experiment-based analysis and put statistical rigor behind the things that they were tracking. And the big takeaway is just the real knowledge that was gained, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg. There was so much stuff that came in, a bunch of stuff that hasn't even fully realized itself yet as this data collection continues to go on, and further phases that have gotten pushed out are yet to come. But it's all just that tip of the iceberg of what you can start to learn with data. I love the fact that Larla brought the unexpected result. I've talked about the benefits of Tin Can 1,000 times now, but I've never gotten into the fact that I never even realized it's going to make troubleshooting so much easier to have all of this data coming in real time, so you can just kind of follow a user's path and see exactly what's going on. And I also love the some unexpected conclusion that the incorrectness was on the too ethical side. I thought that was a great result and a great wrap up to the story here. So all of us are perfectly willing to have further conversations and to talk some more. This is all of our contact information. Again, this will be sent out in the on SlideShare afterwards, so you don't need to jot it down. I'm easily found on Google, and James, Laura, and Susan have all been very gracious to say that they would be happy to talk with other people about these projects and engage in any dialogue that you might want to initiate. So take the time and reach out if you want to dive into these things further. Lastly, we love to talk about these things. Jeff, if you could throw that other poll question out there. If you want the opportunity to dive one-on-one into how Tin Can is going to be applicable to your organization, maybe do a strategy session about how you might be able to apply some of these concepts, we're happy to do that with you. We've got a bunch of folks who spend their days doing just those things. So go ahead and if you want to indicate some interest here, we're happy to follow up with you. It's not a sales pitch, not a big high pressure thing. It's really just about helping you understand this technology. Next, we've got another great webinar coming up pretty soon. You can register for it at tincanapi.com/webinar. This time we're going to feature the UK National Health Service, the world's 5th largest employer, and how they are using Tin Can and Watershed to do a bunch of new things as well. So with that, I just want to say thank you to James, Larla, and thank you to all of you for coming out. I've got about a minute, it looks like, so I'll just dive in and see if we can find one or two of these questions that we can go ahead and answer. So I got one sitting here. Have there been similar success cases from any customers using Tin Can and Watershed with training deliveries through a traditional LMS? Yes, those are actually absolutely coming. Trying to remember what's the first one might be that becomes webinarable. But yeah, using, people often ask me, do you think the LMS is going away, or is the LRS going to displace the LMS? And the answer is not anytime soon. The LMSs are established and do a great job with a lot of the things that they were set out to do, and they form an important backbone of an organization's learning system. But the great part about Tin Can is that it enables data to be synchronized across different systems. It enables data to come out and go into many different places. So yes, we're seeing a number of organizations who continue to use their LMS for traditional formal e-learning delivery, but then they also want to bridge the gap with social systems that they might have out there, or mentoring programs, or real-world learning experiences, and we see them using Tin Can to pull the data out of the LMS and from those other places into a learning record store to start to see things in there. So with that, I think we're out of time. Again, thank you so much for attending today. We really appreciate it and look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks, everybody.